Mandi everybody, today we'll speak about agricultural and food ethics. If we look at food as source of life, we can consider the food sector as the primary field to talk about ethics and a way to test the theories on it. Sassatelli, that is an Italian author, says um, food does have a central role in the creation of the communities, and it is not hard to remember a series of cliches in which their reference to the diet is used to stigmatize or celebrate different images of different collective identities. So I say the central role of the food in the creation of this sector of ethics comes from the fact that its intake modalities and consume frequency are determined by social rules that are nothing more than a translation of ethics and morality. Although food and drink have always get together with the occasion of sociability and even in pictorial representation, the images, the images of food are images of abundance, pleasure, joy, friendship to us. However, food seems to be seems the bearer of suffering even in the abundance of developed countries. Actually, they are always being suffering about food, though manifested in different ways and for different reasons. The images of pleasure dispel the anxiety of toil and mystery. It has always fought for food, maybe a little less with the advent of mechanization, agricultural mechanization, I mean. But this has brought along a range of other issues. By contradiction, in development countries, these are problems more related to the abundance of food rather than in its scarcity. So we have not the problem of the scarcity in Western countries. So Lang say the possibility of inadequate sources of food has shaped human culture, provided religions with rules for daily life, and determined the panorama of historical events. Hunger is rediscovered by each generation. I don't completely agree with it. In fact, in my opinion, in Western society today are rather experienced overweight and obesity that are the other side of the same problem. So from one side we have scarcity and from the other side we have abundance. Both gives problems. In Western country, we are experiencing the abundance problem that are obesity and overweight that brings a lot of illnesses and disease. Food and its hunt created hatred and violence not only on animals from which to obtain work, protein, and energy, but among human beings themselves competing for resources that are limited and for the space to farm. Nature has no ethics. This is a base of my thought. Nature has no ethics. Nature is an exclusively human mental creation and definition. In fact, among the animal, the use of force ensures the survival, although is not sufficient that force and consequently that violence, which in humans we are trying to eliminate, to exclude, to hide or conceal, have a fundamental function in every society, both in obtaining of nutritional resources and in the structuring of the society. So we need violence and use of force to obtain food, nutritional resources, and to structure the society, to modulate the structure of the society. Human being, despite being practically omnivorous, gave to himself mental limits about what one can eat and what not. These fictitious barriers evolve and change with the culture of the wealth, of the culture and the wealth, always finding new elements that create conflicts inside the society. Every place of the world has its own habits and consequently its food ethics, derived from a complexity of inputs that are cultural, dietetic, about the local history, nutritional and territorial availability, social tension, and so on, genetic status, and so on. In general, agricultural and food ethics define its field and the areas that concern the production, the processing, the distribution, and the consumption of foodstuff, focusing its doubts in three main areas: the impact of production on the environment, the condition of animal farming, and the working condition of workforce. A fourth area that is becoming increasingly popular in the analysis of how the consumer approaches the food, also related on the availability of it. The agricultural and food ethics is therefore covered fully in the area of bioethics. In the books of this subject are often listed classification of ethical cases that follow a order of importance attributed to the author or mediated by the social feeling. In this historical period, among the most relevant cases treated, we find concern about the use of cloning techniques to help the infertile couples, the use of GMOs in the territory of a state, of a country, and the duty to provide DNA samples for social security purposes. Among less important ethical issues are included the meat consumption, even though this is starting to get to having a more important position, the possibility to select the sex of our children, and finally, the idea that we have to change current lifestyles to ensure the future generation will inherit a world worth living in it. Anyway, also this topic is taking more importance in our society in these last 2 3 years. The classification that I have made is acceptable, but has to be clarified and integrated, identifying the reasons that are essentially of two types. So we have to consider other two types of reasons. First of all, how many are involved in the issue considered, and second, genetically, psychological equilibrium we have in the society. An ethical, so for the first point, an ethical case scale up its significance as many people are implicated by the problem or are emotionally involved in it. In other words, as many as people reckon to express their views about their ethical positioning and possibly to impose it to others, the more important the ethical case becomes from a life of a society. However, in practice, not necessarily there are any social effect if wins an ethical view over another. The magnitude of the practical effects of ethical choices is divorced from its social significance. I mean, for example, human cloning that creates constant debates and fierce verbal confrontation still does not have a technology that can actually create the conditions that lead to a complete realization. As the second point, we have said that there is a genetic basis that determines the ethic portion known as innate. If the ethical issue is related to this portion from the innate part, it means that it relates to topics that are fundamentals for human psychological balance. Um, and then more the ethical case will be debated in the society. In other words, the innate human cerebral structures create a limit to the acceptance which is almost impossible to go beyond, even though science would allow it. For example, most part of the population unlikely would agree to do experiments on children because naturally we are biologically programmed to protect them. Yet it would not be difficult to conduct experiments on children like Nazis made in World War II. So, a point that is difficult to accept of the traditional bioethics is the continuous research of a single answer to the various ethical dilemmas and the classification as deviants, sick persons, unsick peoples, and criminals of all those who do not share the rules of a specific morality. The situation becomes even more macroscopic with the development of globalization, where ethnic groups clash, even violently, with other ethnic groups in terms of behavior, religions, and food habits because they have problems to understand each other's. Label them as criminal or as immoral peoples does not bring any benefit, even in scientific terms. The analysis that can be done is to see how the different ethnicities, carriers of different ethics, change themselves to integrate. The increase of knowledge changes also those that are considered the principle of bioethics. This fact supports the thesis that the ethics of each of us is linked to the perception. In fact, with the diffusion of new discoveries, the idea of the world and therefore of our reality are changed, forcing us to accept new behavioral patterns. Analyzing the treatment suffered by animals in the past, respect to the present, can help to better understand what we mean. For example, a lot of people believes that many of the methods used in hunting to capture and kill the animals are unacceptable. Yet these methods and practices most likely in the past have allowed the nutrition and the survival of their ancestors. Why now no longer accepting it? Is the ethics of food changed in time? So, considering another example, in the Italian country traditions persist the habit of killing the pork at the end of agrarian season, and if there are not cultural obstacles of it is accepted despite the extremely cruel features of this practice. Who makes it for living get used to it, but those who don't know anymore how it is done, this activity, how it is made this activity, reject the idea of killing the animal, although perhaps they consume meat regularly. This gives us another glimpse on how food ethics can form and how it can evolve, losing component as well. So, in conclusion, uh, um, food ethics is continually evolving. It's all for now. Mind everybody, and at the next time.